You're listening to Travel Tales with Fergal.
Hello, my name is Fergal O'Keefe and you're very welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted to say that today's episode is a destination special on the region of Provence in France, where I'm just back from a family holiday. The Provence area goes from the Italian border to the southern Alps, over to Mount Ventoux over on the east side, all the way down to the Côte d'Azur. But the areas that I'm going to cover in this podcast are around Cassis, which is a gorgeous, I suppose, classy, a little bit ritzy beach town. We flew into the regional provincial airport outside Cassis, and it's actually a perfect base, I would say, if you're going up into Provence or down to the coast. It's outside the city, or even going into Marseille. So I'd really recommend that. And it's actually, the flight we were on was Shannon, which is absolutely perfect. So it's sort of one regional airport to another. So the areas that I'm covering are, as I said, Cassis on the coast, then up into the Luberon, above Aix-en-Provence, which is, I suppose you would call it, the cliched area. When you think of Provence or you think of Luberon, that area was made famous by Peter Mayle's book A Year in Provence. He was based around one of the most famous villages in France called Gordes, and he stayed in Minerve, and he also lived in Luberon. So all around that area is the most gorgeous part of France I've ever seen. I can see now why it's popular with Parisians to have summer houses there, or I suppose after Peter Mayle's book a lot of English go there as well. But it's the most gorgeous part of the country. You know, think of the Luberon National Park is a mountainous enough area so that these hill towns, and around the hill towns, think of fields of lavender rolling up into the hills. There's vineyards, the famous rosé wines of Provence. A lot of them grow around that area. The olive fields around the area, the pine trees. So as you're going along, is the most abundant land in France. They say 50% of food of France is grown within less than 10% of the land in that area. And Provincial, Provence, that area, you know, the people are gorgeous. And I have to say, before this trip, I was, not as always warmed to the French way of life. I thought maybe it was a little bit too perfect in the past, but I don't know if it's my age, but now I absolutely love it. This time in this trip, I loved maybe the formality of the people. I actually like that now, the way everybody is so polite to each other. Everybody says hello, even whether it's in restaurants or even in the supermarkets. They love their local produce. So even in the local supermarket, it's the local produce for that season that is growing, that is there. Every little provincial town in Luberon, they all have their own markets, different days. So gorgeous going out to the markets and getting those amazing fruit and vegetables like the tomatoes, or the local wine being grown by a farmer in the area, and you'd get his wine. Or the local melons, which are the nicest. I mean, I think they're world famous from this region. So I've completely fallen in love with this area. You're going to hear from our guest today, my wife Eimer, who was with me on the family holiday, and our kids. So we talk about the Luberon, which I've completely fallen in love with. And it's also good to point out that all of those villages in the Luberon, each one has got its own character. They're all old medieval hill towns. So they're these like hundreds of years old buildings with gorgeous pastel colours, and the shutters on the windows, and big huge windows. That's what I love now about the French, I have to say. They really look after their architecture and their old buildings. And I love the fact that there's still the old businesses like the butcher shop and the boulangerie, where everybody goes and where everybody gets their bread, and there's the old markets. So I've really fallen in love with that way of life. We also talk about another area called the Alpilles, and the Alpilles area, I suppose, north of it is Avignon, which is the Rhone area, and above that then is Châteauneuf-du-Pape, the famous wine, and that's why Avignon is famous as well. The popes always used to stay there. So above that area is the start of Provence. I think there's a phrase, they go Provence commence en Valence. So north of it is the start of Provence, and the area where we were was sort of There's a triangle of Avignon and Arles and St Remy, and we're in the middle of that, so we could travel to the different areas. And we'll talk also about, as well as Avignon, particularly Arles, which we really loved. I can see why Vincent van Gogh loved it, with the light and the colours, and you could see the sunflowers in the fields. And it's different from the Luberon because they're big open plains with these huge vineyards with vines going off as far as the eye could see, including, you can look at my photos in my Instagram because you'll see pictures of the vineyards and the open fields and how gorgeous, and the sunsets were amazing there as they were in the Luberon. So we'll be talking about the Alpilles area. And that Alpilles area, Luberon was made famous by Peter Mayle's book A Year in Provence, but this area, Les Alpilles, I suppose, is kind of maybe a little bit trendier now for the expat community. People like Heston Blumenthal has a house there, and Hugh Grant, and people like, other famous people around that area. And St Remy is the main town around that. St Remy is, I suppose, one of the main tourist towns around that area. Again, beautiful narrow streets with loads of great shops and great restaurants and a real buzz to it. So that would be a great base. So we're going to talk about the coast, the Luberon, the Alpilles, and all those areas. And as I said, I've just completely fallen in love with this part of France, and the attitude of the people, the sun, the light, the food, the wine. It really does have everything. So hopefully we give you a taste for that now. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Eimer. Hi Eimer, you're very welcome back to the podcast. Great to see you. We're just back from south of France, from Provence, which I think both of us agree was absolutely spectacular part of the country. It's sort of the cliched image that we have of France. Again, we flew from Shannon directly to Marseille, and it is amazing, isn't it, going through Shannon Airport so quick?
Oh, it's so easy. Love it. It's just you get through so quick and you're on the plane before you know it.
So Marseille, I have to say that I have now become a Francophile after this trip. I thought it was just spectacular.
And that's a great joy to me because, as you know, I've always loved France and I love speaking French, and it was my idea to go to France. So I'm delighted that you are converted, and now I'm just envisaging us in our retirement living in Provence.
So we went to, what we're going to talk about, we went to, as usual, we traveled a lot. We did a lot of different areas. So we're going to talk about it. We did Cassis on the coast, a beautiful French beach town, fishing village. We went to Aix-en-Provence, the city. We went to the Luberon, Signon, and then we went over to Alpilles, to a little farmhouse sort of in between Arles and St Remy and Avignon. So it was kind of 3 different trips in 3 different areas, but all spectacular. And I think the kids loved it as well, didn't they?
They did. And I think at the end, we counted all the different towns and villages that we visited over the week, a 2.5 week holiday. And I think we came to 15 visits, and obviously all led by you. Thank you very much. But no, the first stop in Cassis was absolutely beautiful. Loved it. Really recommend it. Really recommend for people to travel to Cassis. Absolutely stunning place.
If people follow my Instagram at Travel Tales with Fergal, I'll put details about all the places where we stayed so that you can get information, or you can just send me a message, DM me on Instagram, and I can give you more information. So the first place, I think, is probably for the kids. It was the most popular one out of the 3 options. Wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think they love being on the coast, but also they could walk to the town and they could walk to the beach, and they had independence to also socialize a bit. The older guys are the age that they are over 18, so they're socializing. So they had huge independence over that week. And listen, who doesn't love the seaside?
But it's spectacular, like it's beautiful, that image of if you have in your head of a French little beach town with like gorgeous, they do it so well. I mean, it's all walking around the area, like you park in little car parks around the town and then walk in, but it's all these real old gorgeous buildings on a waterfront area with a little town, Pebbly Beach, but a town beach. And then there was another beach.
and the great pier, rock jumping and beautiful walk from there into the little town. And I loved all the kind of side streets and back streets in Cassis. You know what? I really couldn't get over how friendly people were. The people were just so friendly. And for somebody who I speak French and badly, but I speak French, and I loved the way that they were really appreciative of that, and they really encouraged me to speak French, however bad I spoke it. And they're just so unbelievably friendly. Like loved. They've such a bad reputation. I think that's probably just from Paris and the city, although I think the Olympics is going to break that reputation.
Actually, that was the same throughout our trip through Provence. The thing I really noticed was how, and it's everywhere. It's like, it's not just sort of saying in Cassis where it was service people, it was in people in the supermarkets, and it was the same in the middle of the countryside as well as like in the seaside town up in the Luberon and the Alpilles area. That everywhere we went, everyone was hyper friendly, hyper polite. Even walking around the streets, which I loved. Everyone salutes you, says hello, and they expect you to say hello back. So, and it's the whole culture as well, like places like Beaucaire, where we went to our final place, little village, where you go in there in the morning to the boulangerie to get your pain de chocolats or your bread in the morning, and it's like you queue up to get your bread, and it's a lovely tradition. Isn't it that?
There's a real calmness. Certainly in Provence, there was a real calmness with everywhere we went. Like they just seem the area around Cassis, the national park, the Calanque. That was lovely. That was a great hike, day hike that we went and walked to the different kind of areas that you could swim off and dive off. And we didn't get to do the kayaking or the boat trips, but there was lots of people doing it. There's lots of opportunities to take a boat, rent a boat, or go on a group boat, or hire kayaks and go around the Calanque and park up your kayak or your boat and dive off into the beautiful, beautiful water. The water was absolutely gorgeous. It was kind of chilly, but it was.
Yeah, but they're little rocky inlets, so little inlets with amazingly like clear turquoise waters. And I think there's maybe about there are little cliff inlets. There's maybe about six of them, as you say, from there's boats going all the time from the main harbour in Cassis. Like you can get on those, or lots of people do kayaking, or then loads of people do the walking. So we did one, we went to the second one, and I'd say that could have been an hour walk maybe, and we did that swim, earned that, and then walk back. But it was lovely doing it that way. You kind of got a good feel for it. So there's loads of things to do in the area. And then another thing we did was we went to the next town. What's that town called? I can't forget. Ciotat, is it?
Ciotat.
Ciotat. And there's a very famous coastal road called the Route de la Crête, which is a lovely coastal road, a bit like the Burren, maybe that sort of look about it. And we actually were doing that the day we were doing the coastal road. Actually, it's a mountain. It's literally on a cliff edge. So if the wind is high, they actually close the roads. So they had police on the roads the day that we were doing it. I think it's rare that it happens, but it was actually closed. We didn't get to do that road, but we went to the next village, which was more of a working town. Like it's a harbour with like big refineries and things there, but also loads of beaches, but also a real cool kind of harbour area with loads of restaurants. And it felt maybe less touristy than Cassis, but that was a lovely spot. We actually watched Ireland playing the rugby sevens in a little rugby bar on the waterfront there, and it's famous for that's where boules, which my kids have always been into since we've been going to France a few times over the years. They even bought a boule set on this trip, so that's where boules was originally invented. What do they call it in Provence?
Pétanque.
Pétanque, exactly. So there's loads of little areas to go around there. So Cassis would be a great place to go. You fly in, and there's also public transport options, like of a bus and you could get a bus and then a train into Cassis if you wanted. Right? So I would actually recommend to people, if you're going to Cassis, just to Cassis, you definitely don't need a car really
No.
to go there. So we only had the car because we were going off around the countryside, but I would recommend that as a little trip on its own for a few days. We know lots of people that do that regularly from Shannon that go to Cassis, and you'd be quite happy, gorgeous place. And actually, if you're so inclined, it's only about 20 minutes in the bus. I had a friend, Adrian, who went into the Olympics because the soccer was actually on in Marseille in the stadium. I didn't even look when I was going for that. So he went to that, and the sailing actually was on in Marseille during the Olympics. And it was kind of cool actually being in France during the Olympics because, lots of restaurants would have big screens up with people standing and walking by in the streets. Kind of reminded me when we were in India many years ago where the cricket was on and they'd have every restaurant would have the cricket on and people would be standing out in the street looking through the window, looking at it. So it was a bit like that. So then our next place that we moved on to was Aix-en-Provence. And that is, I suppose, the big city in Provence. I could be wrong, but I think it's one of the biggest. And it's only from Cassis or from Marseille. It's probably only about 45, 50 minutes up the coast. So it's actually very close. So even if you were in Cassis or Marseille, you can go up and visit it. But Aix, it's a gorgeous old boulevard town. It's at the very center of that main road in the center of town is very famous. That they say it's like a Parisian boulevard. And throughout Provence, and the start of it was in Aix, there's a great, Cézanne and Picasso and lots of artists spent time there, living there. Cézanne's studio, actually apartment from when he died, is still there. You can go and visit that. But, there's a famous bar there called the Deux Garçons where they all used to hang out, and it's still going. And it's the most gorgeous mixture between the boulevard, the main street with lots of restaurants, and then all these little narrow streets with amazing architecture and towns and shutters
The
with
squares, so lots of
exactly.
little squares with the fountains, and it's so leafy. And I just love all the color of the buildings and all the beautiful shutters and windows. And like, I wish we had more time in X. And I think it would be worthwhile spending about 3 or 4 nights there and really exploring the city and exploring the areas around it. But we loved it.
Yeah.
And the beautiful markets. We were lucky enough to be there when there were markets. Oh my God, I don't think I've ever tasted as fruit so delicious. The melon and the strawberries. I mean, those strawberries were divine. Oh my God, they're delicious.
So, and you're saying you're lucky. So we arrived there on the Saturday and the main market, but this is throughout Provence. Every town has got a day where they have their market. And we actually didn't see the one on the Saturday. We saw a little one on the Sunday, but every town has got its own markets and in Provence. And that's what it's famous for. And it's so gorgeous because you get you're kind of learning about what each area is famous for, even within the Luberon, like the melons there from Cavallon, is it? Or
Yeah.
are world famous. As I said, the strawberries tasted like a different fruit than I've ever tasted before. So that was magical. And then on the Sunday we went up to the Luberon. And on our way up to Luberon, just one place quickly I'd mention is Chateau Lacoste, which actually is owned by an Irish guy, Paddy McQuillan. His son owns a press up group in Ireland, and it's a famous chateau, famous for its rosé wine. It's a huge place. But it's actually, if you're in around that area around Aix, it'll be a good day trip around anywhere around, Provence, that area. It's worth going into, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, like all the sculptures were amazing around the vineyard domain, as they call it, and then the art exhibitions,
Mm.
Hearst art exhibitions were brilliant.
Damien Hirst exhibition, but they also have loads of these structures. Like they had Frank Gehry, the famous architect, and other famous architects and sculptures. That spider, some famous I don't know who did it, but it was amazing. The spider, and then they have about, I'd say, 5 or 6 different restaurants within the vineyard as well, and looks like accommodation. But if you're around that area, just as a tip, it would be worth visiting. So then we went up to the Luberon, and that's the image of Provence. I think when I said about the French love to come down there because it's kind of the cliched image of what you'd imagine France is like. So the Luberon is it's a national park, mountainous national park with all these hill towns, with each one has its own characteristic. and its own character. And anyone that's I read it while I was on holidays, Peter Mayle's book, A Year in Provence. He talks that Minerve and Gord was the area that he was around, but he talks about that. And it was lovely reading the book actually, because he was talking about going off to these all different adventures and different villages, and they were all around us. And I picked a place called Signon, which is a little mountain village above a town called Apt, which is probably the biggest town within the Luberon. And it's more of a working town, but it still had nice character. We used to go in there. But Signon is a little hill town, but it's only 5 minutes above Apt. The hit where we were Signon. So we used to go down there to like, go to the supermarket, and Signon, the reason why I picked it is because it's near everywhere. So it's within a 20 to 30-minute drive of all the famous mountain villages around the Luberon region that we could visit in the evening. But Sainon was magical because it was a tiny little mountain town. It had a little, about two or three little restaurants and a little boulangerie, and it wasn't too busy. Even in the height of summer compared to maybe a lot of other places. So we particularly loved it there. I mean, it was spectacular,
It was
wasn't it?
very peaceful, and the views were just stunning, and the sunsets were absolutely beautiful, weren't they? And there was a beautiful viewing area up at the top of the village, which we could watch sunsets from. Loved it. Great base, super base, and our accommodation was just gorgeous with the lovely pool and views from every part of the house. And I think the kids were a little bit nervous driving towards this town because they like action and they're teenagers, and they really thought we'd be in the middle of nowhere. But when they arrived to this beautiful village, they were pleasantly surprised, and they actually loved it. And they loved getting up in the morning and going to the boulangerie, and they just loved the simplicity of being in a little village in France. And of course, every evening we'd head off on our little trips
Yeah.
to see the other towns.
It's like our idyllic day, I suppose, where you get up, let's go down to the boulangerie in the little square 50 meters from the house. So we were a townhouse in the middle of the village, but it also had a pool. So you kind of felt part of I felt like a local, like looking at all the tourists as we're going down to the boulangerie in the morning, literally 50 meters from the house. And then you just kind of lounge around by the pool and read and chill out during the day. And then in the evening we could go off. So for me, picking a holiday, that's the perfect way to go. And then when it's cooler in the evening, you go off. And as I said, sign on. It was, so there was Luberon, which was like one of, each village kind of nearly had its own characteristics. So Luberon is famous, got a castle there. One of the bigger towns, it's at the edge of it's kind of nearly, you go down the mountain to get there, and it's at the edge of the Luberon, but it's stunning town, with loads of restaurants and character and bull courts, etc. Then Bonu is very famous for its food. Gord is famous, one of the most famous, like very, made famous by, I suppose, Peter Mayle's book, but also then he did a film, A Good Year, which actually is we've watched since we came home, Disney Plus. It's interesting, you're watching them sitting in the square, and we were literally sitting in the same square. Um, but Gord is famous for it's considered one of the most beautiful villages in, I suppose, Europe. Then Roussillon has got its ochre, I think it's got its own materials, which is kind of an orangey color, and all the buildings have that color. Luberon, I suppose Luberon could be a good base actually for people. You're kind of on the edge of Luberon, but I love the fact that they all had their own character, and they were so close. Unusually for us, I suppose, as the holiday went on, we actually started, we're not great at the old cooking ourselves on holidays, but we actually started to do a bit of more of that than usual in Signon, because we talked about the markets and the tomatoes, which I'm obsessed with the tomatoes because you actually have flavors in them.
You even managed to convert some of the kids to tomatoes.
Exactly. They've never eaten them before. So eating very simply, like it was as good as, going out in the restaurants, because the quality of the food is so good in the markets, isn't it?
Loved being able to get into the car and drive to these little locations and then drive home. And Amazing base. Definitely want to go back to Luberon again. And what I loved also about that area was the Mistral, the wind. Like
Mm.
the temperatures were probably around 20, 32 degrees, but you didn't feel it because that wind, and it is absolutely beautiful, like coming through, and it was always really manageable in end of July, early August, so perfect temperature.
And when you think of Provence, you think of this one big area, but already we've said Cassis is a French seaside town, sophisticated seaside town, I suppose you'd call it. Then you go into the Luberon and there's these mountain villages. And then you go over to the other side of Provence, which is on the border of where we were. Literally, we're on the border between Provence. It was actually something on this trip that I could never get my head around the whole idea. Where's Languedoc and Provence and Côte d'Azur, and where does one start and the other end? And I actually have my head around that now because the next place we went to this farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. Kind of, it was in the middle of nowhere, but it was 10 minutes from Beaucaire, a village which literally is on the river. And across the river is another town where there's a huge medieval castle, and that was considered Provence. And then Beaucaire was considered Languedoc. So it was like literally the border between the two. And that's where we were. And the reason why I picked this place is because you're in a little farmhouse. It was outside of Beaucaire, but it was 20 minutes from St Remy on Provence, which is really gorgeous, huge, um, provincial town, very, very popular with tourists, but for a reason, because there's loads of choice. Felt maybe a little bit like Galway or something, like it was buzzing. But it's only a little town, but it definitely had more action than say the ones in Luberon. People would like that. So we were literally between that was 20 minutes, then 15 minutes from the house, or 20 minutes from the house was Arles, which we absolutely loved. A kind of beautiful old Roman medieval city with a Roman amphitheater. So loved that. And then another sort of 45, 50 minutes up above us was Avignon, which was where the popes went to. I think it was like the 14th century from Rome, and had the old Pope's fort stroke church in the middle of town, and it had its own characteristics again, and loved that. So again, where we were was all around these areas, and Beaucaire is one of my favorite spots, actually, I have to say, because for me, it felt like less touristy than all the other towns. The kids thought that maybe it was a little, they weren't as impressed with it, but I loved it for that because I would go, it was like, it felt more like a Spanish town, and, Locatin. So this area of Provence, Languedoc, it actually has a huge, Catalan, um, kind of history. And you could see that with the flags in the middle of the town. When there was actually a bull ring. There was the old pedant, the old Boule courts, where there was like hundreds of people playing.
Big championship going
Yeah,
on.
but there were so, and there were so it felt quite like, especially particularly with like the bull ring, that it felt like nearly like a Spanish town. It was very old medieval, those narrow medieval streets like that you would see in Granada. It had that feel about it, but it kind of had character like a real working town. But it also had a lovely river down, which was the Côte de Rhône, the Rhône River, little tributary of it, little canal part coming off the Rhone, goes through the town where there's loads of these boats and restaurants all along there. And it had its own castle, and across the river there was another castle. So there's loads actually to do there. So I particularly loved Beaucaire. What do you think about that area, that part of the trip?
No, I loved the part of the trip. I loved our accommodation. I mean, the when we were driving down this Boreen and we arrived at a farm, I did kind of I was a bit in shock initially because I was worried about the kids. But then wasn't the right accommodation, so we travelled a little bit back and we found the beautiful old house, an old farmhouse. We were on a vineyard. The views were exceptional, and that I chilled out completely in this location. Um, from there, I think my favorite out of the areas that we visited in this area was Arles. Arles
Mm.
was a lovely surprise. It felt like a mini Rome. I mean, the Colosseum was just beautiful, and then the amphitheater just nearby. It just the cafe culture, the buzz. I would definitely love to return to Arles, and I'd be interested in actually going back and then doing a trip up to Nîmes. Um, really loved this area. Love to go more into the kind of the hills. Um,
The Alpilles, they're
yeah,
called. So they're the mountains right beside St Remy. And there's loads of little towns which I totally can't pronounce, but I'd like to get back there because I was reading at the time, like Heston Blumenthal lives there now, and Hugh Grant, and they have this little area is like a little triangle from St Remy up into the Alpine Mountains, but only like it's a 12-mile sort of 12-kilometer radius around St Remy, which is an area I'd really love to visit to get to see it. And St Remy again had a buzz about it, didn't it?
and I know you wanted to travel up there, and I just was conscious of not breaking the kids, because for four teenagers to get 15 trips in, during a holiday was kind of fairly good. It's even on the last day you brought three of them with you to get to go to the boulangerie, and 3 hours later you came back with the croissants after visiting two castles, not one, but two. I thought our daughter was broken at that point. But there's definitely there's opportunities to see so many other beautiful places. But even if I had to go back and repeat the exact same holiday, I'd love it, which obviously we don't do.
In Ireland, like might sound a little strange, but it kind of reminds me of Edinburgh during the arts festival, the Edinburgh Fringe Festival every year. As in, there was like art, there was like photos all over
Photography.
on the walls all around the city, like on the outer walls throughout the city. There was exhibitions going on. There's shows in the actual amphitheater. We'd love to have gone, but we were flying out the next day, so we didn't go. But in the amphitheater, they do what do they call it? Calank bulls, or it's not like bullfighting where they kill the bulls. This is more they sort of it's they don't kill the bulls in this form of provincial bullfighting. But I'd love to have shown the kids that. But they also do loads of gigs, particularly throughout July in the amphitheater, and also in the Coliseum, the Ring Theatre, whatever they call that. So there's loads going on, and we were very lucky actually because we saw Starry Night by
Van Gogh.
Van Gogh. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the Foundation Van Gogh, which I'd really recommend people to see. And all of this is like that was literally a 5-minute walk from the amphitheater. Um, to the exhibition, the photography exhibition was across the road. Everything's within a very handy walk in the center of the city. And Starry Night, it was 100 years ago, when it was painted from pretty much the same spot in Arles by Vincent van Gogh. And it was the first time ever the painting had been brought back to Arles to be exhibited. So it was brilliant to see that in Ireland, to give you appreciation, didn't it?
Yeah, and like normally it's in situ and Musée d'Orsay, and to be able to bring the kids in to see such a famous painting was really, really, to give them that love of art that we have, and
Hopefully.
yeah, and they got to see all the other artists they're exhibiting are have been inspired
Mm.
by Van Gogh's Starry Night. So it was all themed around the Starry Night, and that was really special. But even I mean, the amount of exploring that you can do in that town alone, you were definitely like Curious George going around every corner. At one point, myself and the kids just sat down and just said that we let you off. And
But but where you sat down, that was like the main little square Hotel de Ville, and we just got cut through a building, and that was the old Roman baths. I think it was like Constantine or someone. But you know what I mean? You're just strolling through old Roman baths, and you turn a corner and it'll be old Roman ruins. So that, and supposedly the amphitheater in Nîmes is even better. So yeah, definitely like to go to that. And then the other spot was Avignon. I mean, I absolutely love there. I mean,
there was such a bonus. Or you read somewhere in some guidebook that Avignon was disappointing, so I got in my head that it was going to be a disappointing city, and I really probably didn't want to go because we were, traveling squeezed into the car, and it was just magical. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. And again, I'd love to go back to Avignon. And of course, all of these towns and cities, bigger towns and cities, are reachable through public transport with a great train system in France. And for people who don't want to drive, it's perfect. You can go by train, and Uber is kind of good value in France.
Because I always kind of thought France, like Paris and stuff, it was a little bit too organized and a little bit too perfect, and the people maybe a little bit too uppity, for want of a better word. But now I would go, no, not at all. Like they're so friendly, and I love the formality that everyone says hello to you and expects you to say hello. And the fact I love now the fact that with the kids when you'd ask them to say thank you, you could see they really appreciated it. Just saying merci or saying some words of French that they appreciate that, and I love that.
They really do. I mean, I know French people struggle with the English language. And if they see you making any effort speaking their language, they really appreciate it. And it's not because they believe the French is the only language in the world to speak. It's because they actually really struggle with English.
Okay.
And like I've always loved France. I've always loved French people. So I'm absolutely delighted that you and the kids love it too. And I'm hoping we'll go back there next year.
Yeah, well, it's definitely on the list. But if you listen to if you listen to this podcast, our kids, we've actually done so many holidays now with the kids where we're going, gosh, we definitely have to come back here. They don't believe us anymore now. One of the kids said that they're going, you say that every year, saying like Manny and in Greece. They're saying, yeah, you're definitely. So we always say we're going to go back, but yeah. It is a big world, but definitely around that area. Since then, even I've been reading about other places, getting inland away from the coast. I go the real France because it's just, and I love to see it in other seasons, particularly like Luberon and all around that area. And the other thing is to see it during festivals. I mean, it was a bit of a running theme on this holiday, but it was like we arrived in Cassis and it was the last day of the jazz festival in Cassis, and then we were leaving Signon on a Friday, and the Sunday was like the town festival, and then in Arles it was like we arrived start of August, and July is their festival month, and even Beaucaire, that were in the little village, it was like around that time in the end of July they have a festival where the cows run through the streets of Beaucaire, similar to Pamplona, which I would have given anything to see. I would love to go back for that, and a huge festival. So we literally, as we toured around, which is funny because anytime I'm on my podcasts or on the radio, I'm always saying try to get to places where there's a festival on because you get to see the character. And even in Beaucaire, it was like the end of their festival, but it was we arrived into the town we had to delay a bit of time to before we could go to the accommodation. And we went into the middle of the afternoon, really hot, so everything was closed, like for their
So
siesta, exactly. But in the little centre ville, there was a stage up with the Miss Landowak competition getting ready for that
pageant.
night. Yeah, exactly, for the Miss France pageant, but the local one. And I just love that when you get to see a little bit of the local celebrating. It's like going to Ireland. I would say if you arrived at the fail, at the Fla in Ireland, you would see it or go to a Munster final or something like that. So that's definitely a recommendation.
That evening we did see Miss France,
We
so
did.
we didn't get to see the pageant, the live pageant, but we saw Miss France. So it was highly promoted event that was going on in the area. But we're getting to the different locations outside festival time was probably that's how we managed to get our accommodation.
Well, that's true. Good point. That's probably because I mean, and that's why one reason why I end up in places like Signon or outside Beaucaire because the price difference is huge. So yeah, so basically what we're saying is we really recommend it. Flight from Shannon Airport, Ryanair into Marseille, and then go off visiting. And I've talked about it before in previous podcasts. I've been to Marseille as well and spent a few days there, and that's a really interesting place as well. But I have to say, going up to the Luberon or the Alpilles area, that area of Provence, I so recommend it. I'm mad to go back there. And if you want to feel for it, I would really recommend that famous book, Peter Mayle's book. He wrote, I think, in 1989, A Year in Provence. But you could still see the characters and the stories and the characters of the towns. They haven't actually changed. They're probably, as he said, they haven't, more tourists go there, but that also means there's more restaurants there now, and there's more, things for tourists to do. So that's a good thing. But I would
But it didn't feel too packed.
No, not at all.
We were there at the height of the market, and it didn't feel too crowded or too packed. I mean, obviously the coast was quite crowded, but up the country, it didn't feel too crowded.
No, not at all, which really adds to it. So thanks very much, Eimer.
You're very welcome. When are we going back to Provence again?
I'd ask you to subscribe or follow wherever you listen to your podcasts, and you'll be the first to know whenever a new episode is coming out. I'd also ask you to follow me on Travel Tales with Fergal on Instagram, and you'll get updates on what's coming next. And if you did enjoy the episode, I'd encourage you to rate and review the episode, as it helps other people to find this series. Take care and safe travels.